This is Cool Doug Love. I've got my Digitakt here, and I just want to show you something. So, a little background. There is a quick and dirty time stretch that you can do on the Digitakt using an LFO. There's actually more than one. EZBOT made a video demonstrating a technique that he attributes to data line, aka Jenk. But the one that I'm building off of was actually created by a gentleman called Dialectrics. So shouts to him and shouts to EZBOT and Jenk too. I'll have a link to both videos in the description. I'd recommend both of them, but the one from Dialectrics is kind of the prerequisite course for this one, so you should watch it first. I'm actually going to set things up a little differently though. So let's go over how this works. For this, we need a loop. We don't necessarily need a sample that's a perfect loop, but we do need something in the sample that we can loop. And wherever the center or the midpoint of the sample is, we're going to set that as the start point. We're then going to use an LFO that will jump back to the start of our loop and then run across it until it reaches the end point and then starts over. So what I've done here is just set the midpoint of our loop as our sample start point. In this example, I'm using the amen break. I've got a loop that's exactly 4 bars and I want to use the whole thing. So I've just set it to 60. Next, we'll need an LFO to modulate this thing. And because I want to make it make that kind of Z shape, what I want is a saw. And the speed is going to be 8. And because this is a 4-bar loop, I want the multiplier to be 4. And then for the depth of the LFO, let's remember that what we want it to do is jump from the center to the start of our loop. In this case, it's really easy. The center of our loop is the center of our sample, which is 60, and the start point of our loop is the start of our sample, which is 0. And so the distance between that, or the difference, is just 60. And because we're going to the left, it needs to be negative, and so our depth is negative 60. The next thing we need is trigs on every step of this. And with I've parameter locked the first step to start the LFO so that everything stays lined up on the grid. And so with all that, it sounds like this. Now I can change the tempo without changing the pitch, or change the pitch without changing the tempo. Everything's locked on. So I can still chop the sample up with this. The difference is now that, whereas before I used to, just parameter lock the start points to a given step to start the sample from that point, what I now need to do is actually something a little different, because the start point of my sample is now the center point of my loop. And what the LFO is doing is actually what's determining the start point at any given step. And so what we're going to do is actually use the phase of the LFO to jump to different places on the sample. So this is where your multiplication tables are actually going to finally pay off. The first number to keep in mind is 128. That's the value of a completed phase for the LFO. So this is a 64-step loop, or 4 bars, and that's how long it takes for the phase to be completed. So we can actually look at this current pattern because it plays straight through, and we can see that each step actually corresponds to the phase of our LFO. So it starts here at 0, and then because we're splitting 128 over 64 steps, that gives us 2. So that means that the phase moves a 2 in the course of each step, which means that if I want to jump to this snare, then I just go 2, 4, 6, 8. I can set the phase to be at 8 and set the LFO to start there, and I'll have my snare. And I can do the same thing over here. Just going to set the LFO to start, and this time my I'm going to start at 16. I can keep going. This time it'll be 24. Like I said, helps to know your times table. And we can just do that for the whole thing. So the way I actually chop the sample is, let me go to this pattern here, and I've just got the chops. So that's just the portions of the of the pattern where I've told the LFO to start, and I've told it to start in different places. And so the easiest way to do that, I think, is just to, lock the places where they correspond in the actual pattern, just so you have like kind of a representation of it that sort of, I guess, matches physically or spatially, and then just copy and paste them around. And that's what I did here. And then from there, you just you just write in the trigs like you normally would, and it'll sound like this. And as you can see, this is jumping around, but the time stretch is still going. Even if you don't wind up chopping the sample, this is still a good thing to know if you want to use the time stretch, because if you know how to do it, then you know how to interrupt and resume your LFO so that your track can do something else. For example, I didn't figure out how to get the LFO to work the way I wanted when the sample was playing in reverse. I think the data line technique would work, but I didn't see the need to try it here. And so for this pattern, I just parameter locked the LFO to be directed at nothing for a couple of steps. And then just parameter locked the start point of the part I wanted to reverse just normally. And then it, resumed using the method that we were discussing. And so now with the reverses, it sounds like this. So before I leave you, I just want to run over one more example. We're going to stick with the aim break, but what I want to do is just take this second bar here, just to show you how the values change depending on what you're working with. So for this example, we're taking the second bar, which starts at 30, and the midpoint of that is 45. Which means that the depth of our LFO is no longer going to be 60, because we're just moving from 45 to 30, or 15. And so the depth of our LFO is negative 15. We're also only going for one bar, which means that our LFO needs to move 4 times faster. And so our multiplier is now at 16. And then the last thing to keep in mind with that is, because our LFO is moving faster, that means that each step corresponds to a greater distance in the phase. So it's no longer that, from moving a quarter note takes 8, it now takes 32, because we're moving 4 times as fast. So this is now 32, 64, and 96. So this is just something to be mindful of as you, attempt this on your own. And yeah, that's that. I thought it was interesting. I thought I would share it with you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.